Dr. Jared Jones. I specialize in ancient meditation systems, the cognitive science of meditation, although I am a philosopher, not a cognitive scientist, and Buddhist philosophy. I've been meditating for about 20 years, as I like to say at the beginning of these videos, just so that you know I'm not just some random guy on the internet. And I'm here to try to help people understand, as lay people living in the real world, how do you train in meditation? So, for anyone who stumbles upon this or is new to meditation, please do just put your questions about meditation in the comment section below, or if you're here live, you can put it in the chat. And we're going to do some practice together today, of course, but I'm also here just to answer your questions about meditation training more generally. Also, I wanted to let everyone know I just updated and upgraded my school course, which is linked below. And I'm going to be putting the complete book that I put together for training and meditation as a layperson in that link. So, what is included there under those materials is all of the ways in which you can arrange your life so that your life and your schedule and your mind are cleared and cleaned up of as much clutter as possible, making it possible to meditate as a real person in real life. One of the big problems that I see modern meditators having is that their life is a mess and they think the meditation is going to fix their life. But actually, you've got to fix your life first if you want to be able to train in a serious way in meditation. These two will work hand in hand eventually, but in the beginning, a huge part of your training is actually just trying to get your life in order. Being an ethical person, trying to be a gentlewoman or a gentleman, and arranging your schedule so that you can consistently get appropriate sleep, you can get appropriate nutrition, you can get your ordinary relationships in order, for example, so that your life isn't a mess. If your life is an absolute mess, yes, meditation can help with this, but also if your life is less of a mess, it's going to help with your training and meditation. So this is an extremely, extremely important point that people get wrong all the time. You're meditating to fix your life instead of fixing your life so that you can meditate. As my teacher used to say, in the beginning, you try to work your practice into your life. And after a while, you try to work your life into your practice. So, in the book, I have a huge amount of discussion on how do you arrange your schedule? What is important and not important in terms of your diet? What's important in terms of your schedule? What's important in terms of your work? What's important and not important in terms of your relationships? If you want to be successful in meditation in the real world, it takes quite a bit, actually, quite a bit of understanding. If you just sit around listening to meditation music or singing bowls or whatever, this isn't going to make you better at meditation. You know, listening to pink noise or brown noise or whatever noise is not going to make you better at meditation. The only thing really that's going to make you better at meditation in rapid fashion is getting your ethics in order. Why is this? First of all, ethics shares the same mental activities in common with meditation, primarily that you can recall what it is you intended to do and you can stick to it and actually do it. This is the first skill you need in meditation. Secondly, in a much more conventional and obvious sense, if you're hurting a lot of other people, this is going to create drama in your life. And if there's drama in your life, your mind is going to be a wreck. Your emotions are going to be a wreck. And when you sit down to meditate, it's going to be extremely difficult. So be a gentleman, be a gentlewoman. That's the first piece of advice. Secondly, if you're a real person living in the real world, you have to be able to support yourself. You have to be able to provide for yourself. Now, of course, with the economy being how it is, with AI coming in, blah blah blah, it's going to be much more difficult in the future to find work and sustain work, and that's understandable. But at the same time, it costs something to live. And so if you're not taking care of your basic needs, if you're not taking care of um, your basic requirements to just stay in existence, there's no possibility you're going to have enough stability in your life to make serious progress in meditation. So you have to work. You have to work and do something that maintains you and provides for you financially as best you can. Otherwise, it's going to be, again, quite difficult to train in a serious way in meditation, unless you go become a monk or a renunciate, but that's kind of the opposite of the whole point that I'm putting forward. You can do this in real life. You can train in this in real life. Right. So, what else can be said? So the school course is going to include the book. The school course is going to include all of the videos that I've put up that are relevant to this training. I'm going to park them all there in one place so that you have them conveniently located and in an order that I think makes sense for studying them as resources, as videos, as far as video content goes. And then in addition to that, anybody who signs up, of course, is going to have access to me through the community. So that'll be the sounding board for all the people that are training, let's say, in a hardcore way with me, not just in a casual way. And through that, I'll be able to continue doing this full time and supporting people doing this full time. Let's see. What do I want to talk about today? So one of the things that I do is I put up videos responding to philosophers, to theologians, to academics who are talking about Buddhism or are talking about meditation or are talking about things that are not directly relevant but are somewhat relevant, partially relevant to Buddhism and meditation. And nonetheless, as modern people, I think important to know about. So there's a video I'm getting ready to put up where I'm responding to a theologian who is talking to a university group about Buddhism and is trying to tell them the difference between Buddhism as a system of ethics and Christianity as a system of ethics. And much to my horror and surprise, he's not able to get the basics of Buddhist thought correct. And honestly, I don't blame him. One, he's talking to a non-specialist audience. Two, I doubt very much that he's trained in a serious way, trying to understand how all these ideas fit together and how the various types of Buddhism fit into various categories. And Buddhism it's a huge can of worms. It's a huge can of worms. On the other hand, he does such a poor job of explaining what it is that Buddhists believe in a really fascinating way that a lot of other people also get wrong. So I felt it was worth responding. So what did he have to say? What he had to say, I'll give you one snippet, was that in Buddhist ethics, for example, one of the things that distinguishes Buddhist ethics from Christian ethics is that, according to him, Buddhists say there's no person whatsoever. And since there's no person whatsoever, and since good and bad are dualistic concepts that won't survive ultimate analysis, that in the end, ethics is completely transcended in Buddhism. And in the end, there's no such thing as ethics, and there's nobody to be benefited. There's no action of benefiting anyone, and there's nobody doing the benefiting. And so compassion in Buddhism and love in Buddhism, according to him, philosophically, has no grounding whatsoever. And of course, he juxtaposes this with what you find in Christianity. Um, and I don't really need to go into that argument, but none of that is true. None of this is true. So let me give you an example of this. We've got a couple people in the chat. If you have questions, do pop them into the chat as we go. So consider, for example, a rainbow. A rainbow is a classic Buddhist example. Buddhists are almost always saying, hold on one second. Buddhists are almost always saying, look at a rainbow if you want to understand emptiness and dependent arising. If you want to understand how it is things exist, look at the rainbow. Look at a magician's illusion. Look at a mirage. Look at a reflection in a mirror. Look at these things that are at the edges of your experience where your perception seems to lie to you or seems to go wrong. So, what exactly is it that happens in the case of something like a rainbow? So, what's fascinating about a rainbow is that if you and I were standing next to each other and we were looking at the same rainbow, quote unquote, it would actually be in two different locations in space. And of course, we know that there's no leprechaun and pot of gold. There's no place in reality where a rainbow touches the Earth, because a rainbow is a visual phenomenon that occurs when light bounces off water droplets in the air and it refracts into various hues. And those hues are something that our mind puts in a certain location in space based upon the refraction of that light. So there is no rainbow that exists out there completely independent of this whole process of light hitting water droplets, hitting the eye, being processed, being projected back out as a set of hues in the sky. There's no rainbow other than this. And so some philosophers in the West would say, well, there's no rainbow whatsoever, really. It's just something that's in your head. It doesn't have any existence whatsoever. But this is not the Buddhist argument. The Buddhist argument is, when you look for the rainbow existing in the way it appears, you can't find it. Now, this is a critical point. When you look for the rainbow existing the way it appears to exist, you can't find it whatsoever. How does it appear to exist? It looks like there's a rainbow out there that has nothing to do with me. Seems like it has absolutely nothing to do with me, nothing to do with you, nothing to do with any conscious being. It's just out there existing, and I happen to be here to see it. That's how it appears. In reality, a rainbow is something that only exists as a relationship between the light source, the water droplets, the eye, the consciousness processing the light into an image, and that consciousness projecting that image as a light in the sky with a particular location. The person standing next to you doesn't see that rainbow in that location whatsoever. They see it in a different location because the light is hitting the rain droplets or the water droplets and hitting their eye at a slightly different angle. Their mind processes it in a slightly different way. It's slightly different hues. It's in a slightly different location, perhaps even a slightly different shape. So, the rainbow is a wonderful example of dependent arising. Now, obviously, I'm not saying it's a physically existent thing out there. But what I am saying is, it gives you this sense that your perceptual process is capable of producing something that looks like it exists out there in and of itself with no relationship to you, and yet it actually exists only as a relationship between the world and yourself. Yeah. Now, how this is often interpreted because of, in fairness, I think the way that Buddhist texts present this fact, this truth, how this is often interpreted is like this. In a Buddhist text, they would say the rainbow does not ultimately exist. In English, that sounds like you're saying there's no rainbow whatsoever, doesn't it? That's how it sounds. It sounds like you're saying there's no such thing as rainbows, but that's not what you're saying. Let's see. What you're saying is, if we define ultimate as existing without depending upon the relationships we just defined, then it doesn't exist ultimately. It doesn't exist with absolutely objective, utterly independent qualities and with its own identity and qualities. It appears like it does, but it definitely does not. What we're actually saying is when you look for this rainbow existing in this particular way, it's not going to be found. And because that's the way we naturally do it, since the way that we naturally apprehend or understand the rainbow to exist is as if it was utterly independent, utterly without any relationship to us except that we happen to be there to see it. The way that we describe that in Buddhist texts is to say it doesn't ultimately exist. But the definition of ultimate here is that in reality it depends upon relationships, not that it's utterly non-existent. Rather, because the rainbow that appears to you appears to exist utterly independently, that one doesn't exist at all. The one that exists is one that exists dependently. There is that rainbow. That one exists. And so this is the big distinction. This is the huge shift that needs to happen in your mind and in your perception. This is what at least 50% of the work is about in terms of meditation from a Buddhist perspective. All this work that you're doing in terms of ethical commitments, in terms of training in, I don't know, 70 or 80% of the elements of the path is so that you can realize this fact. So this is hugely important. But the Christian theologian was saying, well, what the Buddhists seem to be saying is because people don't exist ultimately, and because ethics don't exist ultimately, and because actions of an ethical nature don't exist ultimately, that means none of those things are real and none of those things can be grounded in any kind of reality that makes them important, which is absolutely wrong. All of these things exist as sets of relationships. That's how they exist. Let me give you a good example, okay? Let me give you a proper example to boil the egg, all right? Got a few of you here. Think about a river, all right? Think about a river. As a matter of fact, let's look at a river. There's a few of you here. Hang in there with me. And we're going to look at a river together. So one of the fascinating things about rivers is that they like to move. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll see how successful this is. Let me see. Okay. Full screen share. Window capture. There it is. Boom. Okay. Okay. So this is a wonderful video. You can find it on Facebook of 40 years of one river with, I don't know how many images are taken, but I think one a year or a few a year. So just watch. So as you can see, over time, the river is not staying in the same place. Rivers are moving over the course of time. Their shape changes, and depending upon what they're moving over or moving through, they can change pretty dramatically. So if you start asking hard questions about what exactly is this river, when you're standing in front of a river, it seems absolutely and completely obvious what a river is. It's right in front of you. Probably it's ancient, millions of years old, right? Probably this river has been around way, 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 way longer than you and I. But here's the question. Exactly what is the river you're talking about? Can you point it out to me, please? We both agree there's a river. But what exactly is this river that you say exists and I say exists? What are its boundaries? Let me take you through a little story. A river, which is constantly moving, changing, going over different ground, made of different water all the time, has no definite boundaries in time and space. Let's go to the top of the river. When the water is melting, exactly at what point, water melting from snow in a mountain somewhere, exactly at what point does it stop being snow runoff and start being the river? From there, it goes into little tributaries in the mountains. At exactly what point, moving from tributary to river in the top of the mountain somewhere, does it go from being tributary water to being the river? Where and when exactly is that occurring? No way to say. Impossible to say. There is no such place. Okay, so then once we get out of the main part of the mountains and where there's a whole bunch of other tributaries coming in, but then we start looking at, well, if the ground is too dry, then the river will just dive underground, will fill up the groundwater. And so there has to be a certain amount of groundwater holding this river up, right? So here's the gap in the dirt. The groundwater has to come up to here so that the river can stay at this level, unless it's really rocky underneath it, so that the river can flow over without being absorbed into the ground and becoming nothing. So where exactly does the groundwater stop and the river begin? Where is that boundary? Where does river water begin and groundwater end? Over the course of time, 50 years, 100 years, the river itself is running over different ground. The materials that are being carried down it are not the same. The water it's made up of is not the same. When it reaches the ocean or a lake where it runs in and comes to an end, where exactly does it come to an end? Can we look under a microscope and go, oh yes, there's the identity of being a river, dissolving, and now see how it's getting absorbed there, now it's becoming an ocean. Where exactly is that boundary? So from beginning to end, you have an unclear start, you have an unclear middle, and you have an unclear end. So where exactly is this river? And how does it exist? And why is it so obvious to you that it exists? It is absolutely obvious, evident, clear to you that it exists, and yet you can't find it. You can't find it anywhere from beginning to end. I mean, with respect, I think I know where it is. But you can't find it anywhere. So where is this river, and what is this river? Because clearly it's not couldn't be the rocks underneath the river. It can't be the sand in the river or the silt in the river. It's not just the water, because the water comes from snow in the mountains and other tributaries and is mixing with groundwater constantly. We can't just say it's the water. So it's not the ground that it's on, it's not the material running through it, and it's not the water. Well, where is the river then? So when you ask these kinds of questions, you are confronted with the fact that things seem to exist in one way. In other words, it seems like the river's existence is absolutely evident, obvious, completely clear in the way that it exists. It's just there as a river, and I just happen to be here to see it as a river. In the same way that I just happen to be here to see that it's a rainbow, right? In reality, a river is a relationship between what exists out there and you. How do you know? Because when you look at all the component parts making up a river from beginning to end, you can't find a river there. That doesn't mean rivers don't exist. It means that the way that rivers exist is different than you expected. And like this, rivers do exist. Good and evil do exist. Ethics does exist. The person you're acting upon does exist. You exist. The action of ethics does exist. Compassion exists. All of these things exist as dependent arisings, not as inherently existent or ultimately existent things. Not being ultimately existent does not mean non-existence. The Buddha is rejecting two positions. The Buddha is rejecting ultimate existence, and he's rejecting non-existence. As a matter of fact, he's also rejecting a combination of ultimate existence and non-existence, and he's rejecting neither also. It's not inherently neither. If it was inherently neither, then a river couldn't come into existence and it couldn't go out of existence, and yet it does. So this takes a lot of time to cook, which is why, frankly, I've never, with respect to the world's theologians, I've never heard a theologian talk about this in a way that sounds Buddhist, because it's a very difficult set of concepts. And it's not postmodernism, it's not fictionalism, it's not coherentism. It has some aspects that are instrumentalist. It has some aspects that are nominalist, but it's not nominalist, it's not instrumentalist. And it's, well, maybe in some respects instrumentalist, but it's not a pure instrumentalism. It's not an idealism. Even the mind-only school is not an idealism. So this is the trouble that I think theologians have. In any case, Buddhist ethics is established on the basis of dependent arising. Things do exist, but the way they exist is counterintuitive. It's not the way that they appear to you when you're not thinking about it. The river is obviously there. How do you know? Because it can function and do stuff. When you put a raft in it, you can float down it. Fish can live in it. It's not non-existent, but it clearly doesn't exist the way that you thought. Because if it did, the river is completely in your face. It's absolutely obvious, isn't it? Therefore, when you look for the river, since it's so obvious to you, when you look for the river, it should become even more obvious. But instead, it just recedes and recedes and recedes into absurdity. And this is not just a problem for you. The Western philosophers, Western philosophers have been struggling with this problem for 2,000 years. maybe longer. They've been struggling with this in Asian thought as well. Taoism, Hinduism, Jainism. This is really, according to Buddhists, the big question, the big problem that we have in reality. We make this mistake, and then after making this mistake, we add on all sorts of other nonsense. We start by seeing the river as existing utterly independent of us and out there and completely having its own properties, and we just happen to be here to see it. And then in addition to that, it's a beautiful river. Oh, it's an incredible river. And if somebody tries to move in across the thing there into my view of the river, they're going to have a big problem. It's a beautiful woman. It's a handsome man. It's an incredible slice of chocolate cake. So our mind then starts building on exaggerated perceptions on top of this first layer of misperception. And we call the first two big problems you have attachment and aversion. Your mind exaggerates positive qualities and exaggerates negative qualities, and you chase after those or run away from those, thinking that doing that will make you happy. And you do that your whole life, and then you die. And that's it. Right. So on that cheery note, this is the point at which the Buddha might say, look at your situation. You're uncomfortable. You have the suffering of suffering. There's obvious or manifest things you don't like pain, loss, bad reputation, discomfort. So you have these obvious or manifest things you don't like. And then in addition to this, you have to ask the question, what is the actual source of all this? Is it purely coming from the outside? Well, if it was, don't you think the sources for those things would be able to be found outside? If the river is causing your suffering, don't you think that you should be able to find the river? And if you can't find the river, isn't that an indication to you that since it doesn't exist the way that it appears and only exists as a relationship with your mind, in a relationship with conscious beings, that since its identity and qualities are, at least in large part, coming from your side, that the suffering being produced is also coming from your side. And if that's the case, then the solution to that suffering is inside, not outside. Ah. And so if the solution to your suffering, your problems, and so forth is inside and not outside, then there's the possibility of completely removing the cause of those sufferings and problems. And then this is where the Buddha says, okay, well, if that's true, if you look at reality, don't just take his word for it, but if you look at reality, and this is actually how it is, then I have a method that has 8 parts, an 8-fold path to teach you how to get out of this problem. Oh, since it's a little slow today, I'm going to try to fix my camera. I hope you don't mind. Let's see how that looks. Eh? Eh? Oh, oh, oh. Yes. Now I don't look like I'm on another planet, do I? White balance. Oh, yeah. There it is. Okay. Well, it's been a little slow tonight. The usual crew is not here. So, since the usual crew is not here and it's been a little slow tonight, not a lot of new people coming in, um, that was a lot to chew on. I think we'll call it an evening. So, I'm going to carry on working on the other things that I have going on. Thank you so much for coming. Hope you enjoyed the chat. If this has raised comments, questions, concerns, do put them down below. That will be something I can follow up on for you. I am contemplating at the moment doing a series on emptiness independent arising. If that's something you're interested in, please do let me know by putting it in the comment section, and I'll do my very best to get on that at the appropriate time. I just need to think about how to do it very carefully. I've had a request to do this already, and it's just a very sensitive subject. It's something you really do need to get right. So, all right. If you'd like to see some of that, if that's something you're interested in, if you want more content, if you'd like more teachings like this, then let me know. Okay.